Okay, well, hey, welcome back, everybody. Happy Wednesday or Thursday, depending on your time zone, I guess. This is AP Computer Science A. This is the third day of String Week. My name is Rob Schultz. Whoops, let me get to my slide there. My name is Rob Schultz, and I teach at Bellbrook High School in Bellbrook, Ohio.
And I'm Jill Westerlund from Hoover High School in Hoover, Alabama. We're so glad that you're with us today. Here is a map showing a lot of our community of learners. We've got a few more pins to drop this coming weekend. So glad to have all of you with us. Here's some information about the exam. It will have two questions. Question one is going to be either an array or an array list question, and question two will be methods and control structures. And you can see the percentages are one's weighted more than the other, one has more time than the other proportionally. So the first exam day, the main exam day, is May the 15th. If you have an extenuating circumstance, some students may take the exam on June the 3rd, but the plan and the suggestion is that you need to plan to take the test on May the 15th while the information is the freshest on your mind. You can find more information at AP Central Coronavirus Updates, and there's lots of information there about our test and all the others. Today, we're going to be looking at free response 2018 number 3. It is a question that involves a class, but it also involves strings, and it also involves some Boolean statements. So it has a good mix of a lot of the things that we wanted to cover this week. So take it away, Mr. Schultz.
Okay, so we're actually going to tag team a little bit today. Like Mrs. Westerland has said in the past, on Wednesdays, we thought it would be fun to do something a little different. So we're actually going to simulate a free response question. And we are using the question number 3 from the 2018 exam, the code word checker. What you will learn from today, hopefully, is how to interpret the details of a free response question that involves string methods, how to design a solution, and then how to implement that solution. Okay, so we're going to walk you through that process the way we would explain it to our students and how we would recommend that they approach a free response question. So if by some chance you're watching this as a recording, now would be a good time to pause and print if you have access to a printer. I've got the link as to where you can find the free response questions from 2018, and you're looking at pages 12 or 13. If you're watching live and you don't necessarily have time to print a copy, or if you don't have access to a printer, that's okay. We're going to have it on the screen, and between Mrs. Westerland and I, we'll have it where you can see it. So yeah, if you're watching the recording, pause and print, grab a copy, and then we'll keep moving along here. So here's a copy of the question. And before we really get into the question, there are a couple things we need to do to kind of modernize it a little bit. You know, this is the 2018 free response question, and there are a couple things listed in here that are no longer part of the AP subset. So we're going to do a little bit of quick editing. If you have a paper copy, we're going to go through and we're going to correct just a couple of things, and I'm going to explain why. As you look at the top of the question, anything that makes a reference to string checker and interface, we're going to cross that out, because as of this year, interfaces are no longer part of the AP subset. Okay, we don't really need to get into what an interface is or how interfaces work. If you've covered them in your class already, that's great. If you haven't, that's perfectly fine, because again, they're not part of the subset that we really need to deal with. Okay, really all we need to take away from this first part is that every code word checker object that we instantiate has to have this specified is valid method. So as we write our code word checker class, we have to include a Boolean method is valid that takes a string as a parameter, and we'll get more into that in just a couple seconds. Okay, down towards the bottom of the question, there are also a couple places where it makes reference to string checker, and because we are not including the string checker interface, we're just going to modify those real quick and say that those are code word checkers, not string checkers, and then we will be perfectly fine for this question. Okay, so I'll give you a second to make a couple quick updates, and then we are going to hit it.
And also, by the way, I put a one-pager of the question in the Google folder that we have the power-ups in. So that's another place. Yeah, it's another place if people want to go there. It's the same thing.
Okay, so we are going to go totally unplugged, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Mrs. Westerland so that she can bring things up on her handy dandy document camera.
Let's see how we can,
that I'm still really jealous of.
how can we do this? Let's see how
Let's see.
smoothly we transition. How about
Yeah.
that? Oh, it's a
Look at
miracle.
that.
I know. So, okay, so I was following directions and I was writing on my page. I'm also going to pull it up on my phone so that you can see it. So we want people to understand that if you are participating in the AP exam by cell phone, you should be able to do everything everybody else is doing. We don't want you to feel
Yeah.
like that you're at a disadvantage if
Now,
you're on a cell phone. So
yeah. Now, I do want to point out that at this point, we don't know exactly what the questions are going to look like. So I can tell you that this is what a 2018 question would look like if you were looking at it on your phone. Okay. We aren't quite sure yet what the format of the 2020 questions will be.
yeah.
But we wanted to kind of show you looking at a phone just so you could kind of see what it is you'd be working with. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's what I would recommend to my students to do as we start approaching free response questions. We're going to break this down into kind of a process. And I know we've only got 25 minutes for this question, but I always kind of introduce it to my students as, the scenario that I tell them I want to meet them at a Bob's restaurant. They wouldn't just jump in their car and start driving and hope they pass the restaurant. They would, back in the old days, I used to have the students kind of imagine they would go into MapQuest and get directions, or they would at least now go to their phone and put in the directions so they'd have a GPS that was kind of telling them how to get to where they were going. And doing free response questions is kind of the same thing. You don't want to just quickly, glance at the first paragraph and then start scribbling your answer, because 22 minutes will go by or 25 minutes will go by relatively quickly. And if you get to the end and realize that you were going the wrong direction the whole time, then you've ended up wasting a lot of time. So it's a good idea to take just a couple minutes at the beginning and come up with a plan. You want that roadmap so that you have some directions of where it is you're trying to go. So the first thing I tell my students, step one is to take 1 minute. Okay, and I'm going to time you out 1 minute. I want you to take 1 minute and just read it. I don't want you to mark anything yet. I don't want you to circle anything or highlight anything. At this point, I just want you to read the question. So 1 minute, go. Okay, we've got about 30 seconds left. We're about halfway there. Ten more seconds. Okay, so now that we've taken 1 minute just to read the question, I want you to go back to the beginning. And this time, typically I would tell my students that if they had a paper copy of the exam, to go through and start underlining. Okay, but again, we're going to be looking at this on your tablet or on your phone or on your computer screen or whatever. So on a separate piece of paper, we'll kind of modify this a little bit. What I would like you to do is we're going to take another minute. I want you to go back, and now I want you to start making just kind of the highlights of what it is that we need to know. Okay, so look for the big rocks, the big pieces. Okay, and take 1 minute and see if you can come up with the big ideas of this problem. So 1 minute, go. And Mrs. Westerland, if you want to go ahead and start
Want me
writing.
to start writing?
Yeah, go for it.
I know what I'm
That,
going to write,
that
so
way
that's exciting.
you'll just pace behind them a little bit. Okay, we got about 10 seconds left, and then we'll compare with my list and the list that Mrs. Westerland's going to come up with and your list at home. Okay, that's time. That's our 1 minute. Okay, so we'll see what we come up with here. Now, while Mrs. Westerland's writing, I'll share my big takeaways from this thing. Okay, so again, we're just looking at from a half a mile away, what are the big ideas of this question? The first thing that I read at the top, and we've already kind of addressed it, we have to make sure we include a Boolean is valid method. The first paragraph that we get to makes reference to two separate constructors. We've got a constructor that takes 3 parameters, and it specifically tells us the parameters are 2 integers and a string. And the second constructor, it tells us just takes a string, but it also makes reference to the 2 integers. So the fact that they're kind of telling us about these variables that we need in our constructors, there's a little bit of reading between the lines there that means that we've got to have 3 instance variables. We need 2 integers, one that's going to keep track of our minimum code word length, one that's going to keep track of our maximum code word length, and then we need a string parameter called prohibit or exclude, or I mean, whatever you want to call it, that's going to keep track of the string that cannot be included as part of our code word. Okay, and then we also have to include an is valid method that's going to check to make sure that whatever string that gets passed in is valid and doesn't violate any of our rules. Now, at this point, technically, we've used 2 of our 25 allotted minutes. Okay, so I kind of want to keep track of real time how this would be kind of working out as we were working our way through this thing. So we used 1 minute to go through and read it. We used 1 minute to go back and just kind of take some notes. Okay. Next thing I'd like you to do, and Mrs. Westerland's already kind of got a head start for us, is to take those big chunks and start actually kind of writing them out in pseudocode. So we have a constructor that takes our 3 properties or our 3 parameters. We have another constructor that takes 1 parameter, and we need to go through and start figuring out what our constructors are going to do. And we also need to take a look specifically at how we're going to make is valid do what it's going to do. Okay. So take just a second and see if you can write out a little bit of pseudocode for our is valid method. That's going to be the one where I think we're going to end up doing all of our heavy lifting for this one. Now, as you go back and read the examples, it specifically tells us that a string that gets passed into the is valid method is valid if it's between our minimum and maximum length, and if it doesn't include the prohibited word anywhere in there. Okay. Now, I always try and tell my students that the key to doing some of this design is just timing. We obviously don't want to use 15 of our 25 minutes to come up with a design. Probably 3 to 5 minutes at the most, we should be able to kind of flesh out what our map is going to look like. Okay. So I guess if you think about the is valid method and what it has to do, we have to be able to compare the length of our string to minimum to maximum. So I guess there are 3 things, if you think about it, that would cause a string to be invalid or return false. Okay. If the length of the string we pass in is too short, if it's less than our minimum length, then we would return false. If it's greater than our maximum length, we return false. Or if it contains our prohibited word, it returns false. So we could really kind of set this up as either an if-else with a compound Boolean expression, or we could set it up as a series of if-else ifs. Might look kind of nice. So again, it's kind of up to you how you want to design, but we need to start thinking about what this design is going to look like. So as I look at my notes, because I did kind of follow the same pattern as I worked it through under is valid, I just have written in English. If string is too short, return false. Else if string is too long, return false. Else if string contains invalid, return false. And then at the very bottom, I have else return true. Mrs. Westerland, feel free.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep. I know we got to go back to the top before we
Yeah. So
completely write it
yeah, so
up.
at this point, again, we're just kind of laying the groundwork. We're if we were doing this real time and we weren't pausing in between to explain, we'd be on about minute 3 to 4 of our 25 minutes. So again, the idea of this isn't to be writing out the actual code. The idea, the idea is we do this whole process as we read it and reread is just to start thinking in our head and kind of centering ourselves. How are we going to make it do what it's supposed to do? And then once we have our roadmap in place, then we can go back and we can start writing the actual code. All right, so let's take another 30 seconds. And by then you should have a rough design in place at home. And then we're ready to go back and start working our way through. Okay, so if we were back in Mr. Schultz's class at Bellbrook High School, at this point, now that they've got a rough design on paper in front of them, I would say, okay, slide that piece of paper over to the side and let's actually start following the little roadmap we've put together and start converting pseudocode to actual code, because this is what it is that you're going to end up submitting, okay? So this is where we have to get official. I mean, we have to write an actual official, in this case, a class. So we have to have all of our class headers in place. We have to have all of our instance variables declared properly, all of our constructor headers and method headers and all that good stuff.
You want me to keep writing?
Oh, keep going.
Okay.
So we specifically said that when we looked at our constructors, when we talked about that, we have to have 3 instance variables, and we always want our instance variables to be declared private. I tell my students that I hate to say always and I hate to say never, because those are so absolute, but I can't think, and again, I could be wrong, but I can't think of a free response question where there was a need for an instance variable to be public. I know we've done certain labs in my class where maybe one time out of every 50, there'll be a need for an instance variable to be public. But in this case, we want our instance variables private, okay? So we've got 2 ints, min length and max length. We've got a string is prohibited. And then we have our 2 constructors, one that'll take 3 parameters. And one that'll take 1 parameter.
Let's see, just gotta line these up. And sometimes it matters what you name these, depending on the question. Because remember, we've talked about in the past about if you see a lot of courier new,
Hmm.
but in this particular question, it didn't. So we are able to just kind of name these based on what we read
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Really,
question.
the only thing I noticed in this one that was the different font that was the courier new, other than code word checker itself, the name of the class, is that is valid method. It has to be called is valid. So the one thing we didn't mention about the second constructor, in that second part of the first paragraph where it talks about it can be constructed with a single parameter, we made reference to the fact that it talks about minimum length and maximum length, but make sure you catch the detail in there that minimum length will automatically be set to 6 and maximum length will automatically be set to 20 if they aren't specified.
And they're ints, so no quotes. If it were a string, you'd have to deal with that. Let's see, this one's going to look just the same.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we got it down here. And it only gets the string.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Here we go.
So remember, is valid is going to return false if one of 3 things happens. The first thing that could happen is the length of the string str being passed in is too short. So how would we convert that to Java code? So this is where we start looking at some of those string methods. And in this case, we're going to use string str.length.
You want me to do it as an if? How do you want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead and do it as an if. That works. Yeah, in case you haven't figured this out at home, we haven't, we didn't pre-choreograph.
No, you're getting true raw live data.
This is it.
Of reaching into the mind of another from across the miles.
Okay, so if str.length
Oh,
is less than or equal to min,
all right. Now, everyone in the world, are we going to do and or?
well, actually, I'm gonna back up real quick. I think it should just be less than, not less than or equal to.
You don't want to do less than, because it can be 6.
Well,
right?
the length, if the length is less than min, but it can be equal to min. So it says that valid code words have to have 5 to 8 characters. So yeah, so I think we're okay with that one.
Okay.
So if our string.length is less than min, we return false.
Okay. We're gonna do it just as that one thing then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Might be a little easier to follow that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll do an else if, because remember we had 3 different conditions. So else if.
Oh, I need to tighten that up. Write better than me, everyone. All right. This one's going to be greater than.
Now if it's greater than max, if it's too big, we'll also return false. So the other condition that would cause it to return false is going to be kind of a tricky one, because now we have to do a little bit of traversal of our string. So we can't really do an else if for this third condition, which means we kind of have to put everything else under just an else. So so we're going to have an else. And now's where we have to start hitting the string traversal part. Okay. So think about how we would set up a loop to traverse our string, but we also have to be careful how far we go. So so I would start by saying for int I equals 0.
Okay.
So we're going to start at the beginning, and we want I to go up to the length minus whatever the length of the keyword is, because we're going to have to do that comparison. If my keyword happens to be 5 characters long, then I'm going to need to be able to pull a substring from my string without going out of bounds. So we're going to say that we want I to be less than str.length minus keyword.length. Or I should say is prohibited dot length. I was using keyword in my example that I'm looking at.
You wanted me to just cross that?
Do what?
I didn't catch that. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, you're okay. So we want it to be I is less than.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. It's going to be str.length. So let's imagine that str is 20 characters long, but is prohibited is 5 characters long. Well, we need to stop 5 characters before the end. So we're actually going to do str.length minus is prohibited.length. So that way we're only going to go from 0 up to 15, and that way we won't go out of bounds, but we'll still be able to do our comparison.
All right.
And then our increment will just be I++. So we're actually going to be looking at substrings that are the length of our keyword. If our keyword is 4 characters, then we want to look at 4 character substrings. Okay. And I keep saying keyword because when I worked it out, that's what I called my variable. So now we're basically going to look and see if the word is prohibited is anywhere inside str. So we just need an if statement. And we're going to say if is prohibited dot equals. And remember, dot equals is what we're going to use to compare strings. And on Friday, we're going to go into a lot of depth as to the difference between equal, and dot equals. So for now, we're just going to say that we have to use dot equals, and we're going to compare it to our substring from str. So
I need to put that inside here.
Yeah. So str dot substring. And we want to look from I up to, so our substring is going to be I comma I plus is prohibited dot length. So if is prohibited is 4 characters and I equals 0, we're going to look from position 0 to 4 for our substring. And if at any point that happens to be equal, then we return true again. I'm sorry, we return false. My bad.
It's okay.
I'm looking ahead.
Y'all are seeing the importance of writing with a pencil. And I didn't even try lined paper because I knew that would probably be a train wreck.
Okay, and that brings us down to the end of our for loop. If we get all the way through our string and we compare chunks, substring, 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 and we don't find what we're looking for, then at the bottom, outside of our for loop, we can close off our for loop bracket.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we're going to return true, because that means our length is okay. It's not too short. It's not too long. We haven't found our substring. We've gone through all of the tests we need to go through, and we return true. Life is good. Okay.
Yeah.
And there we go. There is our solution.
So I'll leave that sitting here for a second for everybody to look at, and then we're going to talk about what do we do next. All right, so you can pause if you're watching this later. So we have essentially page 1, and so this would be, I don't know how you want to tag it, but I might do a comment and put page 1 of 2 here, and then I might come up here and put page 2 of 2. This is just me talking. What I would think I would do. And so now we know that one of the ways you're going to be turning in work as an option for the AP exam is to take a picture. So I'm going to take a picture of these solutions that we've created together with my phone and see what we get here. So see, if I don't know if you all can see my phone, but look at the shadow. That's no good. We want a picture as not shadow, like this would not make a good photograph. So one of the tricks that I've learned in taking pictures of my journals for y'all is to, and you can't really see it, I'll turn the camera, maybe you can. I propped the page vertically up. I need to get this one out of the way. That's my other page from before. And I'm going to try to take a picture of it straight away. And that's going to help a whole lot with the, I'll show you in just a second. So there's the picture that well, you can't see it because I'm pointing at the wrong thing. There's the photograph. So it has a little bit of shadow in the bottom corner, but it is still readable. Can y'all see that? If I hold it real still, it's not overly shadowed. So now let me take a picture of the other page. So that's one trick, is getting your page vertical.
And one of the things we're planning to do during the last week, or what right now we're thinking will be the last week. So next week is array list week, and then the week after that, we're going to be working just on free response question tips and tricks, and we'll make sure we cover some different things to think about during that week, as far as lighting and making sure your device is charged and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So here is, that's better. You can kind of see that. I'll zoom in a little bit. That's the second picture. I think that's very readable. If I were scoring this, I think I'd be able to read.
Absolutely.
And then there's the first one. And I think if I had zoomed in a little bit, I could have gotten rid of that corner shadow, but you can still read through that. And having the page 1 of 2 up there, I think will help. You don't want to put your name on your paper. It's not important to the AP reader to know your name, but you're going to need to be able to take a clear photograph of the code that you write. And there may be other options that we'll get to that, like Mr. Schultz said, but we wanted to kind of simulate the process from I wrote an answer. I do think probably unlined paper is a good thing.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean,
because
unless
you see how I had to run over line, and it's okay, but getting all the way to a clear photograph. So now I would need to upload those pictures to, go to the next step to get my work submitted from that point. So yeah, there we are.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. So
okay, so I'm going to steal the screen
grab
back.
that,
Thank you.
please. Yes.
Thank you for scribing.
We hope that was helpful for y'all to kind of see the thought process all the way to getting a picture made.
Okay, so I was afraid we were going to run out of time, so I put some code up there, but since we have code, we're going to go ahead and move on. So now I'm going to give you a chance to kind of do the same thing. We have just under 15 minutes left, so we're going to take a little time. And now, again, if you're watching a recording and you have access to a printer, this would be a good time to pause to print, or at least just pull it up on the screen so that you can work through. We're going to give you a chance to go through and do the same thing with last year's free response question number 3, which is the Delimiters question. If you don't have access to a printer or you're watching live, that's fine. I'll make sure that I keep things on the screen so you can see. But I'd like you to try and follow that same process. Now, I'm going to give you, I wanted it to be big enough on the screen so that you could see it, as part of a little PowerPoint slide. So I have it broken down into 3 slides. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds per slide the first time. And again, I don't want you to write anything down. I don't want you to take notes. I just want you to read the question. And then I'm going to go back and give you another 20 seconds per slide just to make note of some things. And then I've got some questions that I'm going to ask, and we'll see how good your powers of observation are, and how well you were able to comprehend certain things from the question. Okay, so take 20 seconds. I'll start you now, and then I'll jump you from slide to slide. Okay, here is the next one. And I apologize if you're like me and you read slower. The nice thing is that this is recorded, so you can always go back and play it again and kind of slow things down a little. Okay, and then 20 seconds for this one. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. And again, I apologize that I'm kind of rushing through these. I'm trying to be aware of the time constraints that we have, but understand that if you were doing this as the actual test question, you can take more time. There's nothing magic about, 20 seconds or a minute or anything like that. Okay. So take the time that you would need. Again, if you want to go back and rewatch this recording later and actually slow this down and read it in a little more detail, you can do that too. So now I'm going to give you 20 seconds because of our time constraints, just to go through and just jot down some quick notes about things. Okay, so starting now, go. Okay, here's your next one. Another 20 seconds. All right, and here's the last one, another 20 seconds. Okay, 5 seconds to go. Okay, so here are the questions. This is what I've got for you, okay? First question, what is a delimiter? So hopefully you were able to pick that out, that a delimiter is a non-empty string. Okay, so in this problem, when they refer to a delimiter, they're referring to a string variable that is non-empty. In other words, there will have to be something in it. They're guaranteeing us that. Okay, what is a pair of delimiters? Okay, well, a pair of delimiters is an open delimiter and a closed delimiter. So in the context of this question, when they refer to a pair of delimiters, that's what they're referring to. And then how many types of delimiters will there be for each string? Well, each string that we receive will give us only one pair of delimiters. So if you're familiar with like HTML coding or things where you might have multiple open delimiters and multiple closed delimiters, this is not like that. We're only going to have one to deal with. So here we start getting to the specifics about this question. What is the overall goal for part A? And again, we're looking just for a general goal. Are we writing a class? Are we writing constructors? What's our goal? Well, our goal is to write the getDelimiters list method. Okay. Are there any parameters for the method? Well, hopefully you noticed that the parameter for the getDelimiters list is an array of strings called tokens. Okay, and then as far as what's returned by the method, well, the purpose of getDelimiters is to create an array list that contains all of our open and close delimiters that it finds. So our what is returned is an array list of strings containing all of the, I've got a little window blocking me here, hang on. All of the occurrences of open del and closed del in tokens. And we've got two questions left. Where do I get open del and closed del, since that's what we're actually putting into our array list? Well, those are our instance variables. Those are things that are already set for us. And then the last question, what skills will I need to complete this task? Well, the big skills for this one, and this is one of those that covers a lot of different things. We have to be able to traverse an array. We have to be able to compare strings. We have to create an array list, add to the array list, and then return the array list. So this is one of those that kind of covers a broad spectrum of different topics. This isn't specific to just strings or arrays or array lists. This kind of takes a little bit of everything. So so I'm going to kind of walk through the pseudocode quickly. Again, I know we're running out of time. So if you're watching this as a recording, feel free to pause and work this one out. This is a really good problem. And it's kind of fun to think about all of the different pieces. So as I think about this from a pseudocode standpoint, the first thing that we need is we need a loop that's going to traverse tokens. And I underlined tokens in my little design because tokens is our array of strings. Okay. If by some chance a token is the same as open del or closed del, which again, those are our instance variables, so I underlined those as well. We have to add token, that specific token we were looking at, to the array list. Now, as you're working through your design, if you get to a point where you're referring to an array list, that's usually a pretty good indicator that, hey, it's a reminder, I've got to go back and I actually have to create an array list for this problem. And then at the very bottom, after we've gone through our array of tokens and we've added all of our open del and closed del to our array list, we need to return the array list. So here's our very, very broad general overview of what it is this code's going to do. Okay, and now that we've got our roadmap, we're in pretty good shape that we can go back and just write out our code. So if I were to write this out by hand, I would start by filling in the method header. So this is the method header we're given. We said that our very first step would be to create the array list. So here's my array list of strings called my delimiter list or my del list, which is a new array list. We said that we needed to be able to traverse our array. So here's my for loop that's going to traverse the array. We said that if the specific token we're looking at is equal to open del, or if the specific token we're looking at is equal to close del, then I would add it to my array list. And at the very end, after we've gone through our for loop, we have to return the array list. So here is what the code would look like based on the little roadmap that I put together. Okay. If by some chance you worked this out, I know I didn't give you a lot of time to work it out, but for those that paused the recording to work out, if by some chance you did this with enhanced for loops, this is what the enhanced for loop solution would look like. So I'm basically saying for every string token in my tokens array, if the token is equal to open del or the token is equal to closed del, then I'm adding the token. And there's our code. So I apologize that I went through that really quick. I'm trying to kind of keep my eye on the clock over here off to the side. We're down to about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure that we had time for our tip of the day as well. So, so Mrs. Westerland, I'm going to pass things over to you.
All right.
For our tip of the day.
So this week we've been working through how to do a snipping tool shot. We don't know if that'll be helpful in terms of the AP exam, but it's definitely a life skill that you need to know. So we're down to smartphone, and I showed you earlier today how to, and you can go ahead and advance, how to make a picture with your phone. Y'all all know that. You're doing that all day, every day. But to take a snip of something that's on your screen, on an iPhone, you're going to press the home button and the power button on the side. The home button is that button in the front center bottom. If you're on an Android phone, it's the volume down and the power button. And then crop it as desired, save it as a picture. And you all do this all the time. You're into Snapchat and you're into Instagram, and you're probably taking pictures of all kind of things, people with crazy faces and crazy hair. And then if you're on an iPhone, sometimes I find that my iPhone saves things as this odd HEIC file type. If I email the picture to myself, it'll sometimes convert it for me into a JPEG or a PNG. So just kind of watch file type when you take snips off of your phone. So that's today's little tip. Tomorrow, I've got Mac instructions to share with y'all. So your homework today is really to finish or work through either of the two free response that we've looked at. But yesterday I pitched to you the my name, and I did put that in the folder. I also said that you ought to think about building a word in a word project and then a password generator. So you might be working on any of those three projects, or if you are really, really bored, all of them. You also have online. If you build a project, if you code out something, we'd love for you to share it with each other. Use that hashtag MyCSAExamPrep. You can make a little video of your code executing, kind of like if you took principles and you did a create task, you make a video of your code executing, and y'all can encourage each other in that way. And then today's free response, you can work on part B. I've given you links to that. You also need to begin to practice taking pictures of your handwritten code. Look at taking the picture with it vertical, to not get a shadow. Sunlight is also helpful, but it isn't always sunny, and some of y'all are going to be doing things in the middle of the night in other time zones. So we got 3 pet pics to show you. Miss Jimenez's chess mate, she teaches at Eleanor Roosevelt High School, or Mr. Jimenez in Maryland, and then this cute little dog from North Carolina. And look at the vertical leap on this cute fuzzy dog from Massachusetts. Isn't that fun? I know, it's like an action photo. It's like a stuffed animal also.
Super dog.
I know, it's so cute. It's so cute. And I've recently been told today that people are sharing pet pictures on Instagram to AP College Board's Instagram feed about their pets watching AP live review sessions. So show us some love on there. If your dog or cat or turtle or snail or whatever is watching us with you, share it. And if you have a device need, you need to let that be known. Time would be of the essence. You know, we're about a month out exactly to the day. A month from today, you'll be taking your AP exam, and we'll be sending you happy thoughts from wherever we are. Um, you need to get this tech issue lined up well before that. You can't let somebody know a day or two before. So we need to know now, cb.org/tech. If you have a tech need that you need assistance with, take care of that. And we appreciate you watching, and we beat the bell.
Yep,
So
just
I
barely.
know. Great lesson. I hope y'all enjoyed us doing a free response live demo. If you did, let us know, and
Yep.
we'll keep doing them on Wednesdays or other days. So
And that's that for today. We'll
that's
see
it.
you tomorrow.
That's all, folks.